I would now like to invite our next speaker. Rob is a senior consultant anesthetist and director of the PatientSafe Network. So he works across many of the major hospitals in Sydney, goes in and out of operating theatres, and has witnessed many problems. And he's actually someone who's decided we need to do something about it, because in an environment where everyone agrees that patient outcomes and patient safety is the most important thing, looking at the actual outcomes and the disparity between those spurred him into action. And so I would like to invite you now. He's also giving a workshop in the afternoon together with Scott Ward on success with the different system to tell us about some of those heartbreaking problems and the amazingly simple things you can do about it. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Let's put this down. So 14 years ago, I broke down a colleague's door and found her dead in the bath. She'd taken her own life. A year later, I was called to the cardiac arrest of a young mother, the daughter of a theatre nurse. Everyone involved in her resuscitation knew her personally. She died from a series of medical errors. Medical errors being reported in the British Medical Journal as the third greatest cause of death. However, we've designed our hospitals on the premise as doctors and nurses, we don't make mistakes. Yet we're humans, just like everyone else, and we make mistakes all the time. 4 years ago, I tried to introduce an obvious safety intervention. Eventually, it was voted in, only for the deputy head of the department to resign. In order to coax him back on board, the initiative wasn't implemented. It still hasn't been. And then voting on the initiative was illegally scrapped from the departmental minutes. And then I was called into a room. And for over an hour, I was bullied and threatened. At one point, the head of department looked me in the face and he pointed at me and he said, "I don't care who you are or what you do, but if you do anything like this again, you are out." We don't stand a chance. Picked off one by one in an industry which perhaps is too ashamed to change. For healthcare to improve, we need to work differently. Hands up if you haven't finished reading this already. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, what if I told you you read the top line wrong? And as a result, a patient died. We work in a high-risk industry. You'd be extremely upset. What else? Information about what happened would be passed up a chain of command far removed from the event, and there'd be meetings. There may be a root cause analysis. We may create a policy or education framework or send out an alert reminding staff to read the sign properly. We may do all of these things and will expend a lot of energy and money in doing so. And we will have wasted our time because another doctor or nurse will come along and read the sign incorrectly and another patient will die. Because what we should have done was change the sign. Ergonomics is about designing the workplace and the equipment in it to accommodate for limitations in human performance. It's about changing the sign. Are there thousands of lives to be saved simply through understanding, respecting, and designing for our human limitation?
After heart disease and strokes, medical error has been reported as the third biggest cause of death globally. The exact figure is difficult to estimate because error reporting in healthcare lacks transparency. But mistakes made in hospitals are leaving patients worse than when they went in. A group of medical staff decided enough was enough and began to agitate for change. Communication errors have been identified as the root cause of the majority of mistakes. Staff in operating theatres can work with hundreds of different colleagues between multiple hospitals, and their faces are covered, so in the midst of an emergency, precious seconds can be lost when clinicians don't know or can't remember the names of their colleagues, which can lead to lack of accountability, wrong equipment used, wrong drugs administered, and so on. To improve communication and reduce mistakes, the answer was remarkably simple. To immediately identify individuals and their roles, we began writing our names and roles on our scrub caps. It was a simple act which changed the culture of the theatre from anonymous to collaborative. Suddenly, it was easier to coordinate, to be more accountable and efficient. With the help of a hashtag, the idea began to take off. Medical staff globally joined in. Some even started printing their own name caps. The world sat up and took notice. What started as a simple idea among a bunch of so-called rabble-rousers has grown into a game-changing movement which is saving lives around the world.
Well, it costs nothing to implement. It's obviously better for patient care. So why isn't it already the norm? Surgeons only know 44% of the names of their staff in their theatre. It's not surprising when we realise as humans we're actually very poor at remembering names. Name and role caps improve name recall, they decrease confusion, and they increase the propensity for staff to speak up. They improve communication, teamwork, camaraderie, and ultimately improve patient outcomes. They're supported by the vast majority of patients and the vast majority of frontline staff too, particularly those new to healthcare. So what is it then that stops us from doing something that we want to do, we know is right, and it's obviously beneficial for patient care? Fear. So who or what is it that we fear the most? We fear most, perhaps, for our careers and those who impact on them. However, these people appear more likely than anyone else to resist ergonomic change. Top-down structures nurture competitive conformists into positions of power. Are these the people that we pander to as we compete against one another ourselves? Because this is what we've been conditioned to do all the way through school, university, medical school, and beyond. Compete against one another. Suggest something that gives us a competitive edge, and we may welcome it with open arms, even when it costs millions of dollars, and there's 15 years worth of data and over 4,000 studies which indicate it's of no benefit to patient care. Yet suggest something which takes this competitive edge away, something which makes it easier for us to do our jobs, an ergonomic solution, and we may look for every avenue to resist it. Why? When we perform general anesthetics, we often put a breathing tube into the patient's airway. Traditionally, we use these devices, direct laryngoscopes, to help us see where we're going and guide us to where to put the tube in. About 15 years ago, they started to introduce video laryngoscopes on the right and devices that do both, video and direct laryngoscopy. It's obvious that the combination of the two, video and direct views, is always going to be at least as good and most often better than a direct view alone. Further, the greater the number of times we attempt laryngoscopy, the greater the adversity. A major study in the UK identified 38 deaths over 1 year from failed airway management, and most of these cases were considered avoidable. One would think that we would gift ourselves and our patients with the best chance of successful laryngoscopy first line every time, which brings me to this survey. This went out on social media with this picture and request. The question breakdown was quite simple, and depending on the answer to your first question, you were asked a different stem for your second question. Our main interest was to find out amongst those who chose direct laryngoscopy first line if their choice would be different given immediate access to the better devices. The excuse of cost or availability could no longer apply. This is the unfiltered results for the first question, the vast majority of staff choosing to use direct laryngoscopes first line, perhaps an issue of availability. Unfortunately not. Do we do things because that's the way we've always done them? Are the top-down structures resisting changes which are better for patient care? Healthcare is an extremely emotive profession. To suggest, particularly to our superiors, that we should be doing something differently can be highly offensive. Do we develop siloed beliefs that perpetuate throughout our specialties in industry? One would hope that as time progresses and you have new staff coming into a specialty, that they'd be more willing to accept a different, better way of doing things. And this is what I believed, until the results came back. Irrespective of being new to the game, anaesthetists were just as likely to choose direct laryngoscopy first line, and also just as likely to stick with their decision when the better device was available. Same with intensivists. In fact, the only group who appeared willing to do the right thing and do the best for patient care, first and foremost, were paramedics, particularly those new to the game. So what strikes me is that paramedics have had a different career path. Are they more accepting of their human limitation, and does this lead them to do the right thing? So what is it then that will lead us as doctors to do the right thing, to do the best for patient care first and foremost? It doesn't appear to be evidence or cost. Perhaps it's something else. Allow me to digress. An anaesthetist from Melbourne, Dr. Jen Dixon, tweeted this just over a year ago. Confusion about the internal hospital cardiac arrest number. It's a time-critical number, yet it varies from hospital to hospital, making it really difficult for staff to remember what it is. Standardizing the internal hospital emergency number provided a great opportunity for us to demonstrate how effective a networked team approach can be in delivering change and improvement. So we crowdsourced the data. We found at least 51 different numbers across Australia. Also, we found out that elsewhere in the world, there were other people trying to do the same. The UK had standardized at 2222 more than 10 years ago. And there's a drive to standardize throughout Europe and internationally. And Dr. David Whitaker, the main protagonist behind this. So we introduced him to our Basecamp group, a great collaborative project software platform. Some of you will have used it, allowing people to chip in at any time. And we might work together on a message to send out further. This infographic goes out on social media. And as well as social media, we've got great links with mainstream media too. This went out on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald. And all the time, we continue to develop great links with healthcare governance. And within a year, we'd managed to achieve something that took the NHS 3 times as long and cost them millions of dollars. All this from a single tweet. Ripples of change become waves of improvement. We'd like to drive this change internationally, and we believe that we can. But what is it that makes a hospital introduce change? Perhaps it's something social psychologist Malcolm Gladwell illustrates through this man. This is NBA star Wilt Chamberlain. In 1962, he scored 100 points himself in a single game of basketball. It's a world record, still not beaten. What's fascinating, though, was that Wilt Chamberlain scored 28 points from the free throw line, another unbeaten record. Fascinating because Wilt was useless at free throws. However, the season before, he'd been persuaded to change his style and start throwing the ball from between his knees like this. And his success rate just took off. But what intrigued Malcolm Gladwell the most was the following season, Wilt Chamberlain reverted back to the regular overhand technique. His success rate plummeted, Yet despite this, he persisted with the regular overhand technique for the rest of his career, and he never scored a high score ever again. In his autobiography, Wilt Chamberlain regrets his decision. However, he says he felt that he had to because, in his own words, he didn't want to be seen as a sissy. He put his own reputation first, and he let his team down. And this is a trait which can be common to us all. Question is, would you let your reputation get in the way of doing the right thing? Or better still, can we create a system which aligns our reputation with doing the right thing, which aligns our reputation with delivering the best in patient care? Well, yes, we can. And we have, and it's been used with great success in driving hospital emergency number standardization, displaying those hospitals which have standardized in green, those which haven't standardized but for which we've got the data in amber, and those for which we don't have the data yet in red. Scoring in this way encourages transparency, a better score where the information's available. And where required, we can apply this technique to any of our projects. Does your hospital support staff displaying their name and role? Does your hospital have video direct laryngoscopes in every theatre? Just as domestic equipment has been rated for years, collaboratively, we're able to rate the equipment and the systems that we interact with. These scores can then be put together and attributed to a hospital, and these hospitals then put on a league table. This is the Learning from Mistakes League. It's a subjective table based on frontline feedback. Working together, we're making this objective, driving safety improvements throughout healthcare. Working together, we'll change this and start heading in the right direction. And working together, we'll create the best environment for patient care. Thank you.